This is Booked for Drama, where stories burn, hearts break, the tea is always hot and never a part two. Today we're diving into the Wolf Whelp. Let's go. The werewolf I raised talked back to me for some illegitimate daughter. When I coldly lashed him with 88 whip marks, the barrage of hate comments nearly flooded the screen with 99 plus. Oh my god, is this venomous woman insane with jealousy? She actually went for the kill. What's the difference between this and treating the male lead like a dog? This is fucking abuse, isn't it? No wonder he chose to save the illegitimate daughter instead of you. If it weren't for her domineering attitude and constant threats, the male lead would have left her side long ago. Me, threatening a disloyal dog. After a long silence, I sneered and ordered all his belongings to be thrown out. She immediately turned and picked a new wolf pup from the arena. Half a month later, Six heard the news and came through the rain from the illegitimate daughter's place, clutching my arm tightly. His eyes were red. He asked in a trembling voice, "Did you really raise a new beastman when I carried that blood-soaked wolf pup home?" The villa was almost deathly silent. No one had expected that just one day after I'd made those threatening remarks, I would actually bring back a new beastman. The butler caught the vase that nearly slipped from his trembling hands, then steeled himself to ask me where to accommodate the newcomer. I shot him a sidelong glance and retorted, "Where do you think we should put him? The beastmans need to be personally trained, so the room will only be next to mine." He tentatively asked, "What about the things in the room?" I coldly replied, "Throw them away. Now everyone knows, the beastman I've raised for 10 years talked back to me for some bastard child, and when we both fell into the water, he swam without hesitation in the opposite direction. Last night, I held back my rage and lashed him 88 times with a whip, yet even when the whip was soaked in blood, he remained tight-lipped, not uttering a sound. I was drenched, my palms burning with pain, until the last whip struck down fiercely, a mouthful of blood sprayed from his lips. I shouted sharply, "Speak." He finally looked up, his eyes devoid of any emotion. What should I say? What does the young mistress wish to hear? Fully aware that I was furious, he deliberately provoked me further with one rhetorical question after another. My life was bought by you, my bones were broken and mended by you, and the rules were carved into my flesh by you one by one. Now that the werewolf you personally trained doesn't obey you, you feel humiliated. I find it ridiculous knowing full well that I was the one who taught him everything, yet when he fell into the water, he went to save that little white flower who was competing with me for the family fortune. The boundless night in the distance spread like thick ink. He tugged at the corner of his lips. After all, the young miss has plenty of people who care about her. One less won't make a difference. Not missing you, I seem to hear something laughable. Six, don't forget why I kept you. His gaze was mocking, his spine cold and proud. I can't fathom the young lady's thoughts. I only know the young lady stands high above, surrounded by admirers. At that moment, countless hands reached out to her on the shore, yet hers was the only back left empty. Perhaps the young lady has never experienced the feeling of nearly drowning and clutching at straws, but I have. In that scene, I was the only one who noticed her. The chill of the evening wind seeped deep into the bones. I tugged at the corner of my lips mockingly. So what? His gaze was icy, each word deliberate. She had only me, only you. The absurdity in my eyes grew larger and larger. In the half-minute-long staring contest, he didn't show the slightest hint of backing down. I scoffed and clenched my jaw, wanting to be her dog. Sure, I'll personally take you there. The werewolf's pride and ferocity would never tolerate such an insult as being called a dog, yet I deliberately chose to humiliate him this way. I drove through the night and delivered him to Julia's rented apartment. When I kicked him down, he only frowned slightly, then, enduring the bleeding wound on his back, he slowly stood up and limped toward the lit villa. His figure was solitary and unyielding. Never bowing his head, they say once bitten, twice shy, no one expected me to raise another wolf cub. At first, the owner of the underground beast arena recommended a large number of different types of beastmen to me. But after looking around again and again, I simply couldn't find one that caught my eye. Feeling frustrated, I decided to leave, just as I was about to pass the corner and step out of the long corridor. A blood-stained hand reached out from a cage in the corner and grabbed my boot. I tilted my head and looked down. I've seen far too many beasts on the brink of death. Most would likely become hysterical, numb with madness, or grovel in pitiful desperation, yet unexpectedly. Amidst the filth of bloodstains and the cold interplay of light and shadow, what I saw was a pair of stubborn, clear black eyes. He said he was willing to be my dog. As long as I gave him a bite to eat. I glanced at the cage's label. Defective goods. The boss, who had been chattering away nearby, broke into a cold sweat upon seeing this. I raised my wrist slightly, blocking my boss's attempt to step forward and stop me, removing the black leather gloves. I slowly crouched down. In the underground boxing ring, forever tainted with the stench of rust and decay, the only beam of light happened to fall right on my fingertips. I lifted his chin, staring intently. If he had just witnessed my entire selection process, he should know how stringent my standards are. Yet now he's barely clinging to life, already teetering on the brink of death. The heartbeat in my chest grew peculiarly restless at this moment. He could hear every single one of his own breaths. 3 minutes of scrutiny felt as long as a century, yet he saw no change in the cold expression on my face. Just as the light in his dark eyes began to fade, I suddenly raised an eyebrow, willing to come with me. The drooping wolf ears instantly perked up. He imitated a dog, wagging his wolf tail frantically, his pupils burning like a flickering flame, rubbing against my wrist. He eagerly repeated over and over, willing to follow you, willing to be your dog, willing to be loyal to you for the rest of your life, never betraying you. Good, words I love to hear. I glanced at the trembling boss beside me and said calmly, then, I had no intention of keeping this little wolf cub, after all. It's just a defective product. It couldn't possibly withstand my long and rigorous training. When the wounds on his body had mostly healed, I told him, you can leave now. He stood frozen for a long moment before asking, why. His dark, moist eyes shimmered with unspoken emotions as he stared at me without blinking. I flipped through the newspaper casually and said, no reason, just consider it an act of charity. The butler stepped forward to pull him away, whispering, our young mistress only wants the strongest and most loyal beast folk. Don't even think about it. Your predecessor was sent away overnight for disloyalty. He served our young mistress for 10 years, and she never showed him the slightest mercy. The butler was still chattering away when suddenly the person beside him vanished. The young beast man left and then returned. His slightly hoarse voice still carried traces of unsteady breath as he asked, can I have a chance to do better than him? For once, I lifted my eyelids slightly. In what way, exactly? He clenched his fingers and enunciated each word deliberately. In every aspect, whether it's strength or loyalty, he would do better than the predecessor mentioned by the butler. I put down the newspaper and studied him with leisurely composure, the spacious and bright living room. He waited nervously and anxiously for my verdict when I brought him back that day. I didn't pay much attention to his appearance. Now that he's cleaned up, I realize every part of him looks aggressive. The brow bones are prominent, and the outer corners of the eyes are sharp, yet, the current dampness of the eyelashes softens that fierce intensity. The stubborn, clear black eyes are exactly the same as they were that day, and that is precisely why I took him with me. After a long gaze, I finally spoke, fine, as long as you can handle it. My training has always been notorious for its brutality. None of the previously adopted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 made it through this period, and he was the 7th one. Names are merely labels, and apart from bearing my surname, the name Seven Taylor holds no particular significance. Yet he nodded very seriously. I didn't intend to start off with such intensity, but his potential far exceeded my expectations. In just 1 week, he completed all the basic training and proactively requested increased difficulty. It even made me wonder if that the defective label had been mistakenly applied. At sunset, he had just finished a 200-pound weighted mountain cross-country run. The muscles in his calves were twitching uncontrollably, forcing him to brace his hands on his knees for support, struggling to keep himself from collapsing. 100 kilometers, 6 hours, maintaining shooting precision even as his muscles tore. He achieved it on his 3rd attempt, leaning one arm on the off-road vehicle's window. I spoke casually into the phone, but my gaze remained fixed on his retreating figure. Suddenly, he turned around as if sensing something. Our gazes met across the distance. He ran toward me down the hillside, silhouetted against the setting sun. The damp black hair on his forehead was tousled by the mountain breeze. The distance closed between us until I could clearly see his flushed neck and the trembling bead of sweat clinging to his throat. The call was from my father, summoning me to attend a banquet. He said as long as I was willing to bow my head, he would let bygones be bygones regarding my actions against the illegitimate daughter. How laughable. A man so ruthless in his youth now genuinely cares about family ties in his old age. I responded lazily with a few words and hung up the phone, young mistress. He struggled to steady his breathing as he came to a stop before me, watching the violent rise and fall of his chest. I suddenly realized that every evening he had been running to see me in such a breathless state, even today, when his body had clearly reached its limit. I chided him lightly, my tone neither warm nor cold. Why must you run so fast? I was afraid you'd get bored waiting too long. My hand inserting the key, paused unusually for a moment. I glanced at him and said calmly, get in. I came here to pick you up in the first place. There's no such thing as getting bored. After fastening the seatbelt, he turned his head slightly, his Adam's apple bobbing lightly, and finally uttered the words he had been brewing for so long. It only took 6 hours today. The bullets didn't miss either. He didn't need to report specifically to me that data had already been recorded by designated personnel, whether it's physical fitness or reaction speed. They are indeed top-notch. You should know that 6's best time back then was only 7 hours and 3 minutes, and he completely shattered that record in just 1 week. The barrage comments are currently in a heated argument. There's no way any beastman could be stronger than the main characters. Right? Who the heck is this? This totally clashes with our werewolf male lead setting. Can someone please step in and do something about this? Why the rush? Did everyone forget this is a novel? It's perfectly normal for stronger beastmans to appear. What's there to be shocked about? In the end, they'll all just fall at the feet of our darling female lead anyway. Exactly. Who wouldn't love our sweet, adorable, and praise-giving little cupcake of a female lead? Once the little werewolf sees through that toxic woman's true nature, they'll definitely run straight into our heroine's arms. I really wish our female lead had been there for this scene. The little werewolf was clearly fishing for compliments, putting in all that effort, finally mustering the courage to ask for praise, only to get a few cold, HMPFS, in return. My heart absolutely aches for him. I've now learned to turn a blind eye to these idiotic barrage comments. Only that last floating comment made me pause and think for once, fishing for compliments, as the car entered the city. The sky was ablaze with sunset hues enveloping the congested vehicles on the elevated highway. I couldn't help but glance at the person in the passenger seat out of the corner of my eye. His ears seemed slightly drooped, and his lips were pressed together. Now, with his eyelids lowered, he stared at the bloodstains on his body, lost in thought. After mentally rehearsing my words several times, I finally called out to him. The young beastman looked up, his thick eyelashes fluttering slightly. Half of his body bathed in the setting sun, unexpectedly softening the killing aura around him. Damn it. The words were right on the tip of my tongue, yet I still couldn't say them. I hesitated to speak, then stopped, only to want to speak again. Take a break tomorrow. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel and finally spoke in a calm voice. Though there was no praise, at least there was concern. He probably won't feel disappointed now, yet, after a brief moment of daze, he said to me, "I'm fine, I can keep training." I turned my head and looked down at his bloodstained calf, not needing a break. I frowned slightly. The barrage of comments answered my question. He probably thinks he didn't do well enough today, failing to meet his master's expectations. Poor little werewolf, hurry up and appear. Female-led. The wicked villain has almost destroyed his confidence. Because I'm afraid of being abandoned for not being good enough. I try so hard to prove myself. It's a pity I encountered a ruthless and vicious antagonist. If it were the female lead, she would have already started showering me with praise. Upstairs, I think we should look at this rationally. The female lead's baby has received so much love that she can share it with others. But for someone like the antagonist's sister, who's never been loved as a child, it's really hard to learn how to love others when she grows up. I feel like I can understand her quite well. Speaking up for such a venomous woman, I think it's better not to. Her twisted personality is her own issue. What did our little werewolf ever do to anyone? The arguments in the barrage grew increasingly intense. I turned a blind eye, my gaze fixed on Seven's face. The last rays of the setting sun fell on half of his face, making the blood stains on his neck appear eerily vivid. The evening clouds spread across the horizon inch by inch, like splashed ink. So dazzlingly beautiful that one could almost lose themselves in it. The prolonged stare made every joint of his fingers curl and tighten, the heartbeat in his chest growing more intense with each passing moment. He couldn't bear such a scrutinizing gaze, his earlobes burned hot, and his eyes involuntarily lowered. Just as he was about to turn away in embarrassment, completely avoiding my line of sight, I suddenly spoke up. "You did great today." His movement of turning around froze for an instant. I added an explanation. "So, you can take a day off tomorrow as a reward." The congested overpass finally began to move. Not everyone is born knowing how to love, but I don't mind learning a little more, especially for this little wolf cub that I will raise with my own hands. A week later, at the banquet, I arrived as promised. This was the day my father would officially introduce and acknowledge his illegitimate daughter. The girl stood timidly under the dazzling spotlight, wearing an intricate and expensive gown, receiving the gaze of everyone present. Meanwhile, Six stood behind her with an arrogant demeanor, adopting the posture of a protector. Their eyes met from a distance, his gaze filled with cold indifference. I moved aside and met that innocent yet subtly provocative gaze beside me. Her eyes seemed to say, "See, the werewolf, father, everyone stands by her side." The barrage of comments erupted in cheers. No wonder his whole mental state changed after escaping that poisonous woman, without our gentle, healing heroine. I can't imagine how pitiful the male lead would be. She must be fuming with rage. May the young couple last forever. No one is allowed to tear them apart, judging by her expression. She's probably on the verge of turning dark. Lol, I let out a scornful laugh. Thanks, but she actually turned dark long ago. So dark that everyone fears her now, especially my father, in his eyes. I am ruthless, cold-blooded. The kind of wicked offspring who would scatter his ashes in the future. Even more crucially, I discovered Julia and his other illegitimate children before he did. This was the definitive proof of his infidelity. Seeing his devoted and loving husband persona on the verge of collapse, he had no choice but to launch an emergency PR campaign, bringing back the most obedient and naive Julia, claiming it was a mistake of his youth, filled with remorse and desperate to make amends at the same time. He could shift the pressure onto me if I showed obvious hostility toward Julia in public. I would be criticized as narrow-minded, disregarding my father's feelings, and cold-hearted. He thought I was too proud and, provoked by his phone call, would definitely not attend this banquet. But now, not only have I come, I can also stand calmly before him and smile at that illegitimate daughter, calling out, "Little sister." Many in the audience began whispering among themselves. I heard David was devoted to his wife, with only one precious daughter for decades. How did this illegitimate daughter suddenly appear? HMPH, which wealthy man doesn't have multiple wives and concubines? Who knows how many he's got outside? Seems the eldest Miss Sia has it tough too, raising that beastman for over a decade only to hand him over to an illegitimate daughter. I'd be dying of frustration. What's there to regret about a disloyal dog? I moved effortlessly among the guests, exchanging pleasantries, offering compliments and toasting. That silent yet scorching gaze cut through the crowd, following my every move. I pretended not to notice. Before long, a sudden gale began to rage outside. The gloomy sky was torn apart by lightning, with thunder roaring deafeningly. I turned around just in time to see the werewolf pull Julia into his embrace, gently and dutifully covering her ears. "Don't be afraid." Another clap of thunder resounded. I couldn't help but think of the little wolf pup at home. His condition after training today seems off. It appears unusually restless. Only after noticing my furrowed brow did Julia finally pretend to spot me, cautiously saying, "Weren't you originally Sister's beastman? You should be protecting her." The werewolf's expression remained cold. "She doesn't need me," but she stammered. "Sister seems upset now. It was my fault she left you behind. Maybe you could apologize to her first. And then I'll go say sorry too. I really don't want to be the reason for you too." He cut her off coldly. "It's not because of you." Two pairs of eyes simultaneously turned toward me. I waited for their next words. The werewolf's gaze was direct as he sneered. "After all, the young lady is high and mighty. Whatever she does must be justified, since it's her own choice. What more is there for me to say? It's my fault." 6. Now it really seems like my sister is angry. Maybe you should. The two of them were going back and forth in perfect harmony. Suddenly, the butler came running in, panting heavily. A sudden sense of foreboding rose in my heart. What's wrong? Seven's estrus has erupted. The doctor said he's allergic to inhibitors and might die without comfort. Young mistress, please come back quickly to see him. My expression darkened abruptly as I turned and followed the butler out. Suddenly, my arm was grabbed tightly. His footsteps came to an abrupt halt. I turned back with a cold glare, the werewolf's bloodshot eyes fixed on me, his voice trembling as he confirmed, "You've taken in a new beast, man." Julia watched us nervously. I sneered and slapped him hard across the face. "Get back to your master." That slap was still too light. His grip on my arm tightened even more, his nails nearly digging into my flesh. "You clearly promised I'd be the only beast man by your side, why?" His eyes burned with unshed tears as he stared at me stubbornly. How dare you just casually replace me with another beast man? I find it ironic. 6, aren't you, the one who sought out someone else first?" His voice choked with emotion. "That night, it was clearly you who abandoned me." I suddenly laughed and enunciated each word clearly. "Didn't I give you a choice?" That night, after kicking him down, I waited there for a minute, a 60-second countdown. I gave him one last chance to admit his mistake, but his back was proud and unyielding. He never looked back, even limping. He was determined to make his way to Julia's rented room. My hands gripping the steering wheel turned white. After a long silence, he let out a mocking laugh. 10 years of training had just raised an obedient dog for someone else, absolutely ridiculous. The last 3 seconds, I withdrew my gaze with a cold expression. The roar of the engine sounded in the night. At the moment he slightly tilted his head, I had already turned and began to leave. It took some time to return from the banquet hall. Without bothering about my drenched body, I listened to the doctor's brief explanation and went straight to the second floor. As soon as I approached the door, I could sense the overwhelming stench of blood recklessly assaulting my senses. I frowned and pushed the door open. The young beastman had already lost control, his ears and wolf tail emerging uncontrollably. He was trembling, curled into a ball under the blanket, letting out unbearable whimpers. A werewolf's hearing has always been sharp, the wolf ears trembling even more violently as I approached. His knuckles turned red from gripping the blanket, unable to pull the blanket away. I could only command 7, come out. His entire body was shaking. Sweat dampened the fine hairs on the nape of the neck where the scent gland lay. "No, don't touch me." The restless heat in the air grew scalding. Desire was on the verge of breaking free from restraint. 7, do you want to die? I lost my patience and roughly ruffled his hair. My fingers slid down, brushing against his scorching, sweat-drenched gland through the blanket. His entire body trembled, suddenly tensing up. Outside, a violent storm raged with thunder and lightning. In the dimly lit room, I was pinned against the wall by his uncontrollable force. His unfocused, dazed pupils reflected my image. His reddened eyelids trembling slightly. He knew he shouldn't, but he couldn't resist the wolf's most primal, savage, and straightforward desire. To seek comfort from the one closest to him, the furry tip of its tail trembled uncontrollably, brushing against my calf, an intense and scorching pheromone, mixed with the bloody scent of unhealed wounds. Enveloped me with overwhelming dominance, he desperately restrained his urge to get closer, only daring to press his head against the crook of my neck. The silver-furred ears twitched repeatedly in discomfort. The gland on the back of his neck was fully exposed to my view. My fingertips had just brushed against it. He shuddered as if electrified, letting out a muffled, breathy sound. Somewhere between a whimper and a sigh of satisfaction, I relaxed, I murmured, stroking the nape of his neck. He impatiently nuzzled my neck with his lips, pressing closer against me. I rubbed the burning skin on the back of his neck. Does this feel better? Except for the occasional times during training when I would correct his posture with my hands, he would never again have moments this intimate with me. The closer that familiar, longed-for body heat got, the more intense his desire to be close became. No good, not good at all, with every movement of his palm. The restless heat inside him surged even more fiercely. He wanted the other to hold him tighter, to bury his face deeper, to do something even more outrageous. "It hurts," he murmured. The corners of his eyes trembling in red, holding back to the extreme, yet still only daring to lightly nuzzle my neck with his wolf ears. "I want what?" I asked. He didn't speak, his unsteady breaths carrying a scorching heat. Almost enough to melt me. Again and again, he arched slightly, as if testing, as if pleading, until a warm palm grasped it. "Like this?" I asked. The young wolf cub's pheromones weren't as heavy as an adult wolf's. More like the crisp bitterness of pine needles snapping underfoot in a forest after rain. He was excessively obedient and overly sensitive, his trembling lashes framed eyes that stared at me unblinkingly, moist with emotion. Even the slightest movement could elicit wave after wave of low gasps from his throat. In the latter half of the night, the storm subsided, and the outline of the full moon slowly emerged on the horizon. Moonlight filters through the window screen, casting rippling waves. The turbulent tide of passion has gradually receded. He lies sprawled between my legs, drenched in sweat. My fingertips still linger on the gland at the nape of his neck, my gaze falling upon the scars etched across his back. These were left by training. I haven't had time to apply medicine yet. The shadow of moonlight just fell on the edge of the wound. I touched it very lightly. "When it hurts, do you think about leaving here?" His back trembled slightly. His groggy mind hadn't yet cleared when subconsciousness drove him to answer, "No." In the dead silence of the deep night, he propped up his exhausted body and met my gaze. In those moist, luminous eyes reflected both the moon and me. He said, 7 will always be loyal to the young miss." My heart trembled ever so slightly in that moment, my fingers unconsciously tightened. But there is no such thing as eternal loyalty. It's merely that one hasn't encountered a temptation compelling enough to sway the heart, just like the werewolf I raised for 10 years, seeking advantage and avoiding harm, choosing the best shelter. This is the nature ingrained in the bones of beastmen. Years of lessons have allowed my reason to prevail. The full moon makes the wolf's nature overpower the human heart. I've heard too many promises of loyalty from the beastman's groveling at my feet. At that time, I didn't take this cliched vow of loyalty to heart. Until many years later, it was only when I stood alone gazing at the full moon on the horizon that I suddenly realized that little wolf had long been prepared to devote its entire life to me. A werewolf's mating season typically lasts for a week, allergic to inhibitors, and he must be constantly soothed. I cancelled many appointments and had the butler move my work to the house for the nth time. I was reviewing Julia's background investigation results in the study. Her birth year coincided with the year before my mother went insane. The man who had promised to love her forever and take care of her forever had long since cheated. I rubbed my temples and closed my eyes for a moment. Those gentle, timid eyes, always brimming with tears, appeared before me once again. This was also the reason I didn't like Julia. Besides being an illegitimate daughter, she resembles my mother so much. Thinking that her pitiful vulnerability could evoke men's protective instincts, believing that her understanding nature and self-sacrifice would earn men's praise and sympathy, believing love to be supreme, thinking promises would always remain unbroken, so when the fantasy collapsed later, she found it utterly unacceptable. Father had always been a respectable man, even when my mother was driven to madness. He remains known among outsiders as a devoted husband who loves his wife and daughter, even earning a reputation for being unwavering in his loyalty. Little did they know. He has several illegitimate children who can't be publicly acknowledged. Among them, Julia is the easiest to control. I effortlessly uncovered Julia's past. She had been using the identity of the Taylor family's daughter to swindle and rack up exorbitant debts long ago in an attempt to improve her life. She was even recruited by some shady figures on the fringes of the gray zone. Though she never delved into the core of illegal activities, the risks were always present. These matters could be blown up or downplayed. It all depended on how they were handled. Within 3 days, numerous negative news stories about the Taylor family's illegitimate daughters surfaced in the media. David could certainly recognize my handiwork, yet he chose to let it be, because this was exactly the effect he wanted. The harsher I was with Julia, the more justification he had to strip me of my inheritance rights. I've frozen all of Julia's bank accounts. I heard she's being hounded by creditors now under so much mental stress that she's crying all day long. Everyone is waiting to see the drama of a wealthy family's internal feud. Only Six couldn't stand it anymore. On that late night when the rain poured relentlessly, he rushed over from Julia's place, begging me to spare her life. Though he was pleading, there wasn't a trace of submissiveness in his demeanor. His back was straight, his tone icy. She's not like you. She knows nothing. She can't handle such a blow. Different. I pondered over these words. She was naive and foolish, while I was ruthless and cunning. Indeed, they were different. So what are you trying to say? Please, young mistress, don't target her. Spare her life. Just these 2 sentences made me laugh out loud. Looking down from above, I stepped on his shoulder and leaned slightly forward. Six, with what identity and what authority are you ordering me? He held his unyielding spine straight, his gaze burning. As if after hundreds of rounds of struggle, he finally spoke with difficulty. As long as you're willing to let her go, I'm willing to return to your side. Come back to me. How did he have the courage to use himself as a bargaining chip? I suddenly laughed, pressing down hard with my foot. What makes you think I'd still want a dirty dog? At the age of 10, he fought through round after round of brutal combat, covered in blood and barely alive, only to finally earn the right to kneel at my feet. The butler warned me at the time that a wolf's nature is hard to tame. But I was born with an unyielding spirit and refused to believe it, instead spending even more time teaching him to grow. For decades after, I accompanied him through every training session, watching the scabs on his body fall and form anew, over and over. I watched as he gradually grew taller, learning to control his form, watching him pass one trial after another, growing stronger each day until he became the greatest beastman. But then Julia appeared. Only then did I realize I had never truly tamed him, not even now. His shoulders trembled but refused to yield, stubbornly bearing the increasing weight beneath my feet, defiant and unyielding. His gaze was obstinate, believing he had seen through my heart. He spoke sharply, word by word. An overly young and immature defective product would require too much time to train. You wouldn't have the patience. Let alone the fact that he doesn't match your ambitions and could never meet your harsh and cruel demands. The implication was clear. He was my best choice. Are you investigating him? He remained silent. I pinched his chin, forcing him to meet my gaze and scolded me with a frown. Speak. He avoided answering and steered the conversation back to Julia. As long as you spare her, my life is yours to do with as you please. After a 3-minute-long staring contest, I chuckled lightly and patted his face. What a loyal guard dog you are. 6. But your life, I find it too dirty to take. I'm quite pleased with that young wolf cub. Young, obedient, full of energy, with eyes only for his master, unlike you. 6. My voice was low and icy, piercing straight to his heart. A thankless wretch, what makes you think you're still worthy to stand by my side? The villa was eerily silent. For a long moment, he stood frozen, his restrained eyes welling up with red. Suppressing the tremor in his fingers, he fixed me with an unwavering stare, as if confirming what I said. He felt the situation was veering off course. How could someone so driven by conquest reject him so decisively? How could they say something that stabbed straight at his heart? The butler, keeping his eyes downcast, reminded her, Miss, it seems 7 is in heat again, without giving him another glance. I immediately turned and went upstairs, at the same time. It was only then that he truly realized, all his belongings in the living room seemed to have disappeared, that first baby tooth, hanging in the center of the living room, carrying the significance of growth, the pot of fountain grass on the balcony that he always loved to flick with the tip of his tail, the worn, shiny collar engraved with his name hanging on the hallway hook, even the scratch marks he left on the wall when bored from sharpening his claws, gone. All gone. There was no longer any trace of his life here. The once familiar home suddenly felt strangely unfamiliar. His eyes suddenly stung, and he blinked hard. His gaze followed my footsteps as I went upstairs. His pupils suddenly constricted. That room which had once belonged solely to him, was now occupied by a new beastman. The butler kept a straight face as he had the bodyguards drag him away. He suddenly struggled violently. No, he didn't want to leave. This was his home. He didn't want to go anywhere. Scalding tears hit the ground. A tidal wave of panic surged from the depths of his heart. Until that familiar yet indifferent door shut him out. Rainwater mixed with salty tears streamed into his mouth. It was only then that he realized in horror. I truly didn't want him anymore. During this period, Julia's massive debts and the public opinion storm caused the stock price of the Taylor family group to plummet. Many partners announced the suspension of cooperation with the Taylor family. Yielding to the pressure, I proposed the separation from negative influences plan to preserve the Taylor family's core interests. David had no choice but to make a difficult decision, severing father-daughter ties with Julia and ordering her to settle her personal debts independently, just as the media storm began to subside. And he thought he could leverage this incident to temporarily strip me of my inheritance rights. I played a video at the shareholders' meeting despite the blurry quality and shaky footage. It showed him confessing to marital infidelity and forcing my mother to her death. A domestic violence clip. It was recorded by me at just 6 years old, holding the camera. I've been playing this game for over 20 years. Julia's involvement was just a coincidence, but it turned out to be the spark that consumed David. I hold the thing he fears most, the dignity he values above all else in his life. Everyone held their breath, not daring to make a sound. I twirled the pen in my hand and let out a mocking chuckle. Father, you now have 2 choices. First, I can immediately expose this evidence and your illegitimate children to the world, letting everyone see the true face of the Taylor family's CEO, the so-called devoted and loving husband. Of course, you could kick me out of the Taylor family entirely, but I wonder just how far the family stock would plummet afterward and whether you could endure the public scorn. Second, you voluntarily resign from all positions in the group, sign the equity transfer agreement, and let me take full control of the Taylor family. I'll allow you to keep a hollow title and a decent pension, out of respect for the 20+ years you raised me, long ago. He had foreseen this day coming, despite his utmost efforts to prevent it. He still couldn't avert this outcome, between complete ruin and disgrace. Or losing power while preserving a shred of dignity, he had no choice. He controlled his shivering, cold body and slowly laughed. Truly my daughter, sharp, calculating, willing to sacrifice family for justice, I humbly replied, all thanks to your excellent teaching, though I had gained actual control over the Taylor family. David had managed things for many years, and there were still quite a few die-hard loyalists within the group. I was just struggling to find a proper excuse to purge these people. The opportunity came knocking on its own. Vice President William organized a banquet under the guise of celebrating the new chairman's inauguration. All I needed was to confirm their crime of drugging the drinks with the intent to harm the chairman, and I could completely eradicate all remaining opposition. The butler specially prepared a colorless, odorless drug that perfectly mimicked poisoning symptoms. My plan was to enter the game personally, just dipping my toes in, but an unexpected twist occurred. Among the drinks served by the attendant, the one prepared by the butler was missing. In its place were 2 specially crafted cocktails. Vice President William wore a confident smile, claiming it was specially for celebration. Without showing any emotion, I pointed to the glass in his hand. Vice President William burst into laughter along with those around him. Seems the young mistress still doesn't trust us. He downed the glass in one gulp, staring straight at me. Surely the young mistress wouldn't refuse to honor us old retainers. I took the glass of wine handed to me by the attendant and smiled. How could that be? David was more foolish than I had imagined to think that one day I would resort to such underhanded tactics. 7 stood behind me, his thin lips pressed tightly together as he stared at the glass of wine in my hand beyond the rich aroma of alcohol. There was also a certain hidden peculiar scent upon discovering the flaw in the plan. The butler immediately traced it back to its source. Just 1 second before I took the glass through the earpiece, I was informed that both glasses had been tampered with. They wanted to make me lose my composure in public through this drink, even capture indecent footage to force me to step down. Ridiculous. Did they really think everyone in this venue was on their side? I smiled and raised the glass to my lips. All eyes turned to focus on the scene. Suddenly, 7 stepped forward, gently blocking with the back of his hand, and under everyone's gaze, he took a glass of wine. The young lady has a low tolerance for alcohol. Allow me to take her place. He stared at Vice President William without hesitation and downed the entire glass in one go. Beastmans are more sensitive to the effects of medicine. Half a minute later, he immediately developed an abnormal flush. I seized the opportunity to play along. Feigning concern, the butler stepped forward to investigate. Then reported loudly to me, the wine has been tampered with. Someone is deliberately trying to harm the new chairman of the group. The scene erupted in uproar. The butler stayed behind to handle the aftermath. I took 7 back to the villa. The doctor is off duty today. His entire body had gone limp with weakness. His eyelashes damp and his once bright eyes were now misty, gazing at people with a hint of confusion. His skin was flushed a delicate pink all over. his Adam's apple bobbing as he let my fingers roam freely over his body. Though his body clearly craved more touch, he could only plead with eager, longing eyes, so obedient and pitiful. I teased him, "Do you know what's in the wine? And you drank it for me. Are you really that worried about me?" He buried his face in the crook of my neck and mumbled a muffled, My fingers mischievously slid down, giving a teasing pinch. A low, desperate moan immediately escaped his throat. "Want it?" His damp eyelashes trembled violently as he pressed urgently into my palm. "Want what?" "Say it." I tapped lightly, neither too hard nor too soft. "Should we kiss?" His voice was muffled and hoarse. "Yes." I pretended not to understand. "Where should we kiss?" He bit his lip tightly. I feigned ignorance. "You have so many sensitive spots. If you don't tell me, how am I supposed to know where to kiss?" My fingertips trailed upward, merely circling the nape of his neck. His breath hitched abruptly, burying his face deeper into the crook of my neck. His ears turned so red they seemed about to bleed. "Tell me, where should I kiss?" His eyelashes drooped low, the redness from the tips of his ears spreading down his neck, his voice hoarse and rough. "I want to kiss you." I froze for a moment, then a ripple of amusement spread in my eyes. Was he really this innocent? I blocked his lips as he tried to lean in, teasing him on purpose. Aren't werewolves supposed to be picky? What if one day you meet someone gentler, someone who treats you better than I do? Would your heart follow them instead? The mist in his eyes hadn't cleared yet, but there was a stubborn determination in them. No, Seven will always be loyal to the young mistress. He tilted his head up and pressed closer. The once restless tail tip stopped its erratic movements, obediently curling around my waist. Outside, the moonlight was bright and gentle, spilling over our intertwined figures. All those vows of loyalty, all those promises of forever, melted into this pure and bashful kiss. 10 years is a very important milestone for me. In the first decade of my life, I raised a white-eyed wolf. In the second decade, I was betrayed by the white-eyed wolf and, by chance, picked up a blood-covered little wolf from the gladiator arena. And the third decade, it keeps recurring in every dream I have thereafter. Perhaps keeping David around in the first place was a mistake. He joined forces with the remaining factions, aiming to eliminate me completely. It was just an ordinary day when a speeding black car targeted us, the moment bullets shattered the window. Seven instinctively lunged forward, shielding me with his body from the flying glass shards. The scene was in complete chaos at that time, yet he still dragged his bloodied body and desperately shielded me with all his might. Bullets from different directions precisely pierced through his heart. The butler and bodyguards covered me as they dragged me away. The first time I shed tears, I shouted his name sternly. "Six, come back." For the first time, he disobeyed my command, charging forward with sheer courage, using his own strength to block the swarming assassins before him. Until the sharp blade plunged into his back, pinned him completely against the wall. Scarlet blood slowly trickled from the corner of his mouth. In his final moment of life, he looked at me, the corner of his lips curling ever so slightly, the bloodied tail tip swayed with painful, determined effort. Just like our first meeting in that pitch-dark underground fighting arena covered in blood, he wagged his tail and said he was willing to follow me. Two similar figures overlapped infinitely in this moment. His lips moved with difficulty as he smiled shyly through tears, saying Seven will always be loyal to the young mistress. The training ground in the suburbs had long been abandoned with weeds reaching past the ankles. The butler asked if I wanted to find another beastman. I looked at the scene before me and didn't respond. I once thought the word, loyalty, was just a tactic used by small creatures to climb the social ladder. After all, Six's betrayal was like a thorn, making me distrust any beastman's ability to defy their instinct for self-preservation, until he truly fell in a pool of blood, fulfilling that promise with his life. The sunset sky was dazzling and radiant. I sat in the off-road vehicle, staring blankly at the abandoned training ground before me. In a daze, I seemed to see that little wolf again, just finished with training, its dark fur fluttering at the forehead, panting heavily as it ran toward me down the slope. In its eyes shone that clear, bright light, always reserved only for me. The wind blew into my eyes, caught off guard. Scalding tears suddenly fell. Whenever I gaze at the full moon alone, I always catch the scent of pine needles mingled with a bitter freshness. Perhaps it's an illusion. Or perhaps he's truly watching over me in another way, just as the little wolf promised, never to leave the young lady, after hearing the story above. And that's a wrap on today's reading here at Booked for Drama. If you felt anything, rage, swoon, secondhand heartbreak, let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your fellow drama lovers. If you have any requests, drop them in the comments. Until next time, keep reading, and keep the drama on the page.